Good afternoon to the great state of Indiana. Welcome. We're so pleased to have you as the press with us here today as we are talking about Indiana taking a leadership role to restore our country's fiscal solvency on this President's Day, where we are here to express our support for our President and Congress to do the hard work to tackle the country's $38 trillion of debt. And I'm joined here today by state leaders who are part of the story of what brings us here today. You know, when I came on board as state comptroller, I knew that I had to be active on the national debt front because as hard as we've worked in the state of Indiana, due to the work of our governor and our legislature here, we have become a model of fiscal responsibility. But we are vulnerable to the rapidly dissolving financial position of our country. And so we have come together to pass several resolutions thanks to my friends here. And I want to tell you how this all came to be. I was speaking with a group of legislators as the chairwoman of the National Debt Crisis Task Force of State Financial Officers Foundation about the work that we're doing to bring awareness to the gravity of the debt problem. And several legislators asked me, well, what can we do? And I said, you could pass a resolution modeled after the one our governor, then Senator Mike Braun, got passed in the United States Senate. He brought forth this resolution calling out the national debt as a national security threat, and that deficit spending is, quote, reckless, unsustainable, and dangerous for our country. And his resolution passed in a bipartisan fashion, and not only that, it passed unanimously. And that was all it took to inspire a couple of our state senators with us here today, Senator Brett Clark and Senator Daryl Schmidt. And they took a resolution modeled after then Senator Braun's to the Senate President Pro Tem Roderick Gray. And Senator Gray got behind this with full support, brought it in front of the Senate in the waning weeks of the last session, and it passed as well, with huge bipartisan support overwhelmingly in the Indiana Senate. And then I called my friend Jonathan Williams, who is the president and chief economist of ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, and I said, Jonathan, you got to hear what the Indiana Senate just did. They passed this rock-solid resolution calling out the gravity of the national debt problem. I said, any way you could turn this resolution from the Indiana Senate into a model resolution and get it passed in as many of the 50 states as possible. And I also reached out to Senator Linda Rogers, who's a chair for ALEC here in Indiana, as well as Senator Jim Buck, who's a former national chairman of ALEC. And between the three of them and the leadership of ALEC, you all turned Indiana's resolution that came from Governor Braun into a model resolution for the states. And now the House, the Indiana House, is poised and going through the process of passing a resolution on the gravity of the national debt here this session. And we have about 10 states now that are following suit. In some shape or form have got it in the process of considering passing this resolution. And we expect that number to grow. And today is a big launch of that effort, and that's why we're so honored to have so many with us here today to celebrate that launch. I want to also recognize State Treasurer Daniel Elliott. Where are you, sir? He serves with me on the National Debt Crisis Task Force Executive Committee for our association. So I truly appreciate your leadership as well on this issue. And with that, it is my great honor to turn it over to our Governor, Mike Braun, who's been a tremendous leader on this front.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wish there was that much passion when I was serving in the U.S. Senate for the subject we're talking about here. And to be honest, when I did that resolution, it has to be juxtaposed to the fact that as a privileged motion, I took a bill to the Senate floor about balancing our budget over 10 years, not even including interest. Every Democrat voted against it. 1/3 of the Republicans at the national level voted against it. What does that tell you? When you have the printing press in the basement, you have no backbone to do what, in my opinion, would be the simplest thing every household, every small business especially, even if you're big and mighty, a big company, sooner or later, if you start spending more than you're taking in and you keep doing it, you're out of business. You're going into Chapter 11 or Chapter 7. I talked about this ad nauseum in the U.S. Senate, and the sad thing is, when they lost track of what the founders intended, and that's never to try to legislate yourselves into prosperity, we are where we are. And I want to give you a little chronology of how quickly it has occurred. We had no national debt. When we did, up until the time when we started accumulating it, maybe back in the 60s, it was paid off because there was a stigma to borrowing money and not feeling morally obligated to not only pay the interest, but to pay the principal with it. That occurred when we engineered through the federal government so many things that were easy to sell, but even the platform from the Great Society, they would never have done it by borrowing money from our kids and grandkids. That is shameful. And most states actually believe that. Some roll like the federal government does. So let me give you what's happened in a short period of time. And this was probably back to when Reagan cut taxes and he didn't think spending needed to be attended to. I don't like to even bring that up because he is the bastion of fiscal integrity. Other than when you did that, and when we were measuring that in the tens of millions, hundreds of millions, $1 billion was a big figure, because that is when it got legitimized in our federal government. From that time to from Great Society to 1980, roughly $1 trillion. From 1980 to 2000, we're up to about $4-5 trillion. Put 2 wars on the credit card in the early 2000s, that's W. Bush administration, we add another 5. Keep with me on the math. We're $10 trillion in debt. Obama gets elected in 2008. Now, after those 8 years, we did have the big downturn, the deep recession. That was under $1 trillion to solve it. We were already running structural deficits to where $16 trillion in debt at the end of his administration. Now we're running $1 trillion deficits. I get there in 18, keep with me on the math. We're $18 trillion in debt. Yes, we have a crisis come along. Terribly mismanaged. What'd we do? We borrowed and spent even more. And then administrations since then have never had it in their heart to actually do what this is about. And thank you for bringing this to the forefront. This isn't going to be solved willingly by the people that are running our country at any level. They've gotten used to it. And unless you had that printing press in the basement, you would be on the ash heap. You would get no line of credit renewed. You would not be able to borrow any money. And since no one in the American public is on recourse to pay it back, here we are. Well, in this short period of time, we are now paying over $1 trillion in interest, which equals what we spend on either Medicare or defense. It's a terrible business plan. Anyone with kids and grandkids, you ought to be loudly opposed to that poor policy. Don't count on it until you hit the ditch harder. Medicare Trust Fund goes bust in 4 years, Social Security in about 8 years, and that'll be the first time the system has been shaken to where somebody will have to wake up and do something about it. It'll be like going through an informal Chapter 11, but it's sad that our leaders at the national level would need that to get them with it. This is so important to me. It's one of the reasons I said it wasn't worth another 6 years there, because it was like talking to the side of my barn back home, and that's okay once or twice, but it's not okay if you keep getting the same response. Thank you for our own comptroller, for the brave individuals behind me. We do not have the printing press in the basement, therefore we got to live within our means. And probably the proudest thing that I was a part of when I was a state legislator is that we passed the first leg of the balanced budget amendment in 2017 and then got it over the hump in 18. That's why your Hoosier state will do what everyone else does. Don't spend more than you take in, or you're going to pay the consequences. Sadly, we're going to need more states. We probably won't get a convention in the states, but sooner or later, we need to shame Congress into doing it, passing an amendment, getting it done, giving them the guardrails that they needed a long time ago. Our country would be better off for it. Thank you so much. Hopefully this is the start now of state number 10, where we get about maybe 25 more, and let's get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Braun. I'd now like to introduce in this order, we're going to first hear from our Senate President Pro Tem, Rod Gray, followed by Senator Linda Rogers, and then Jonathan Williams of ALEC.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I'm very glad to be here today to highlight this matter of critical importance to our nation and its future success. That, of course, being the status of our national debt. I want to thank Comptroller Nishala for her dedication to raising awareness on this issue and being such a strong advocate for sound fiscal management of our tax dollars. Senate Republicans share deep concerns surrounding America's national debt, and while we can't directly control what happens in Washington, D.C., we can control what happens in the great state of Indiana. We think Indiana, frankly, is a shining example of sound fiscal management. To that end, one of the things the Senate Republicans have done in recent years is pass several resolutions calling for the Article 5 convention to address the whopping $38 trillion we have in national debt. Fiscal management, as you all know, means hard decisions. Senate Republicans consistently make those hard decisions, and our caucus has championed paying down our state's largest unfunded pension liability, that of course being the pre-1996 Teachers Retirement Fund. Over the last several years, we've paid an additional $3.7 billion to that fund. That is in addition to the annual $1 billion that we've been paying down on that fund as a regular course of business. This is remarkable progress. In 2014, the fund's funded status of the pre-96 was a little over 32%. Now it's over 75%, which is very, very close to the 80% mark that indicates a prudently funded status. Last year, when we faced a fiscal revenue forecast showing $2 billion less than we expected, we, along with the House, made the hard decisions and tightened our belt. In that same vein, the General Assembly has passed 11 straight honestly balanced budgets, something we are extremely proud of. And we have done all of that while cutting taxes more than 20 times over the last 10 years. Before I wrap up, I want to give a shout out to Senator Schmidt and Senator Clark for bringing the resolution number 51 last year and starting this conversation so we could play our part in drawing the attention concerning the national debt. I'm proud of their leadership in our caucus on this issue, and having ALEC use that resolution as a model for other states is a testament to that good work. I also want to thank Senator Buck for his involvement in that resolution, as well as his involvement in ALEC, and also Senator Rogers for helping coordinate today's event and for her leadership in pursuing sound conservative leadership in her district and for the state of Indiana. Thank you all so very much.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. I am truly grateful for our leadership. Governor Braun, thank you so much. Controller Nishala, thank you for your steady, hard work on looking at the national debt. Chairman Bray, thank you. Thank you as serving as our leader in the Senate. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize Senator Schmidt and Senator Clark for bringing the resolution. I carried a small part by being able to present this resolution to the ALEC Task Force on Tax and Fiscal Policy. And this was to legislators all over the country, and it passed unanimously. Then it went on to the ALEC board and again passed unanimously. It's truly fitting that we here in Indiana are leading the charge on this, because we have developed a roadmap. And that roadmap is creating strong, conservative fiscal policy with discipline. It's pretty simple. Spend less than you take in. Also, when you look at debt, have policies to reduce and eliminate debt, just as Senator Bray just spoke about. These are so important. It's important to also have a strong fiscal reserve in times of need. And then lastly, we also spoke about the balanced budget. Very important, and we do that. Every year we have an honestly balanced budget. So we are leading the charge. We've established the roadmap, so it's time that we make America like Indiana.
Well, good afternoon, and just wanted to thank my good friends here from Indiana, especially Comptroller Nishala, Senator Rogers, and Governor Braun, for your leadership at ALEC and also here in Indianapolis on this issue. From our perspective nationally, we're glad that Indiana doesn't just lead the way when it comes to football championships. You've led the way for a very long time when it comes to pro-growth economic policy and fiscal responsibility. In our annual Rich States, Poor States report, Indiana's been one of the biggest winners in the nation, moving from a middle of the pack to number 3 best in terms of economic outlook in our latest report in 2025. Add to that, the balanced budget amendment here in Indiana is another piece of model legislation that we at ALEC have adopted because of its success in Indiana. We think it's the gold standard of state balanced budget amendments. And so we're so excited today to launch this national effort from an ALEC perspective to help educate the American people and to state legislators across the country of the dire state of affairs of our national debt and what can be done about it. And as we think about celebrating our 250th year as a nation this year, what better birthday present could we give to this nation than to get back to our roots of limited government and effective and accountable government for all? That's what we're here to talk about today. I don't need to tell you that much more about the gravity of the situation. I hope everyone understands what that is today. But one new illustration of that I think is really important as we talk about the difference between $1 million, $1 billion, and $1 trillion. 1 million seconds gets you about 12 days ago. 1 billion seconds gets you about 32 years ago. And 1 trillion seconds, you go back 32,000 years before recorded history began. Folks, $38 trillion and counting of national debt. We have a problem on our hands. How do we get out of it? First step, we stop digging it deeper. The second step, we rely on the wisdom of the founders that not all good ideas should come from Washington, D.C. They should continue to come from the states. We at ALEC look forward to continuing to be partners with all of you here for fiscally responsible, commonsensical policy and a return to common sense across the country. Thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you, Jonathan. And now we have the honor to hear from State Representative Tim O'Brien, who is the author of the House resolution on the national debt that is just going through the process as we speak. Representative?
Well, hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Tim O'Brien, State Representative. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's truly an honor to represent Southwest Indiana in the Statehouse. And first and foremost, I want to thank Governor Braun and State Comptroller Lisa Nishala and the fine group of legislators right behind me for their advocacy and for being here today and highlighting the importance of this issue. Today in Ways and Means, I have the pleasure of presenting House Resolution number 28, recognizing the seriousness of the United States national debt and the threat it poses to our nation's long-term security and stability. This resolution is not about partisanship, it's about stewardship. It reflects a shared responsibility to acknowledge the scale of the fiscal challenges facing our country and the consequences of inaction. Today, the national debt exceeds $38 trillion. Let me repeat that, $38 trillion. Federal spending continues to outpace revenue by a wide margin. Key trust funds that millions of Americans rely upon are projected to face depletion within the next decade. These are not distant concerns. They're measurable realities with real-world implications. Fiscal strength underpins national strength. When debt grows faster than the economy, it constrains our ability to respond to emergencies, invest in the future, and maintain global leadership. Leaders across administrations and parties have warned the unsustainable debt levels weaken economic resilience and create long-term security risks. This resolution acknowledges those warnings and affirms that fiscal responsibility is a matter of national importance. House Resolution 28 expresses three straightforward principles. First, that the rising national debt represents a serious and growing concern for our country. Second, that responsible budgeting practices are essential to long-term economic health. And third, that Congress should commit to a consistent and effective budgeting process that promotes accountability and sustainability. This measure does not prescribe specific policy solutions. Instead, it calls for attention to a challenge that transcends ideology and urges renewed commitment to responsible governance. It also ensures that this body's concerns are formally communicated to Indiana's congressional delegation. Our duty as public servants includes not only addressing today's needs, but safeguarding tomorrow's opportunities. Recognizing fiscal risk is the first step toward responsible action. And I'm thrilled to be joined by more than 40 of my colleagues on this resolution today in bipartisan fashion. Now is the time to rein in deficit spending and reduce this unfathomable amount of national debt that burdens Hoosiers and harms our national security. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Representative O'Brien. And last, we get to hear from Dr. O.J. Olega, the Executive Director of the State Financial Officers Foundation, which is the association that I am a member of and through which chair the National Debt Crisis Task Force of Financial Officers. Dr. Olega.
Thank you, Comptroller Nishala, for your incredible leadership on this issue. It is because of leaders like Comptroller Nishala that we have this issue at the forefront and something that we need to resolve. Because of leaders like Governor Braun, we now have a forefront focus on the national debt. Now, regular Hoosiers and regular Americans may be wondering, why is this so important to me? Well, first, it's because of the interest that we pay because of the national debt. The governor talked about this already. $1 trillion are spent paying for the interest on the national debt. That means $1 trillion that cannot go to paying for the specific needs and issues that regard the American people. You can't have $1 trillion that's no longer spent on Medicaid, on Medicare, on services for people who need it. You no longer have money that could be spent on roads to improve so that kids could get from their rural home to the school that they go to, because we need those dollars to be spent on the interest. Or that money could go back to you as an American, as a Hoosier, in the form of a tax cut. But because we have to spend $1 trillion on the interest on the national debt, that money no longer goes into your pocket, so you can spend a little bit more on the things that you care about. And that is the second issue. When you have too much money being spent at the federal level, you have too many dollars chasing too few goods, and as a result, you have an increase in inflation. When you have an increase in inflation, that means the stuff that you need to buy, you can no longer afford. Gas goes up, diapers go up, groceries go up, all because the federal government has spent too much of your money. When we reduce the national debt, you increase the affordability of a regular Hoosier and an American citizen. When you reduce the national debt, you cut away the interest and you can spend money on things that are most important, or better, you can return it back to you, the Hoosier, or you, the American people. I stand with my colleagues today to say this is not a partisan issue. The governor talked about how it took bipartisanship to get us into this mess. It will take bipartisanship to get us out of this mess. And so my comment is to every single legislator across the country, regardless of your political party, you have a duty and an obligation to the people that you serve to vote on a debt reduction resolution that will make sure that people understand this issue is one of the most important of our time. And I'll say this to close things out. We have been the greatest country in the history of the world for 250 years. We have done big, hard things. We have separated ourselves from an empire. We've fought a Great Depression. We've won 2 world wars. We've created equal opportunity for every single person in this country. We should be able to resolve the national debt issue. And I think our legislators across the country can do so, and it's high time that we give them a reason. So again, I thank Comptroller Nasrallah for the opportunity to stand by her side today. I thank Governor Braun for the opportunity to stand by his side today, and also Treasurer Daniel Elliott to stand by his side today. And I urge all of their colleagues and all the colleagues of the members of the legislatures across the country to make sure this issue is top of mind. Thank you. God bless you.
It is time. The need is urgent. So let us come together to restore America's fiscal solvency. And let us take great action in this 250th anniversary of our political independence to certainly shore up and create a long-term plan for getting our financial independence resecured. Thank you all for being with us, and God bless this effort, and we ask you to join us.
I don't think there's a session delay. It's 1:30 now, so just an FYI.
There's no session delay?
I don't